Daniel's best female friend had just gone through a breakup. At the engagement celebration, Daniel escorted Chloe, who was wearing a wedding dress, onto the stage. He introduced her to Grace. "This is my fiancée, Chloe. Since you stole me, get down on your knees and offer your respects to the original. Chloe has always disliked having the same things as others. If you splash the champagne tower on yourself and return the 50-carat diamond ring your dad bought you to Chloe, I'll continue with the engagement with you." Everyone looked at Grace with sarcasm and mockery. No one spoke up for her. They were convinced that Grace had pursued Daniel for 10 years and was deeply in love with him. Grace calmly signaled her bodyguards to disrupt the engagement celebration she had meticulously planned for 5 years, then turned and left. She called her father. "The fiancé you mentioned last time, I'll marry him." Grace returned to their shared apartment to pack her things. Daniel rushed in shortly after, forcefully splashing 2 bottles of red wine on her. Watching his incredulous expression, he explained calmly, "Grace, don't ignore what I said. I told you not to wear the same dress as Chloe. If you won't do it yourself, I'll help you." Grace's heart ached. Daniel had clearly seen her preparing this wedding dress for a year, meticulously handcrafting every stitch. Perhaps his expression was too sorrowful. Daniel's demeanor softened, showing a pang of concern. "Grace, Chloe just broke up, and she's a bit depressed. She's insisting on having an engagement with me to spite her ex. This is just a joke, we can reschedule our engagement celebration." His tone was gentle, but deep in his eyes was annoyance at Grace's perceived immaturity. Grace suddenly lost the desire to argue. 8 years ago, after an argument, she broke a rose hair clip. Daniel saw red and fought with the other person for 2 hours. He even braved heavy rain, searching the city all night to find a craftsman who could fix the hair clip. He brought it back to her, holding it like a treasured item. He had promised earnestly, "Grace, your things are precious. I'll protect them for you. No one is allowed to damage them." Grace lowered her gaze. "It's not necessary. The ruined engagement celebration doesn't need to be restored." She no longer wanted the toxic relationship either. Seeing that Grace wasn't crying or making a scene, but was instead cold and distant, Daniel's brow furrowed. He wanted to explain something but was interrupted by a phone call. He gave Grace a guilty look and walked a short distance away to answer the phone. His voice held a tenderness he didn't even notice himself. "Chloe, it's okay, Grace isn't mad. We're pals, helping each other is what we do. Don't throw your life away over a guy. Don't forget, your buddies have your back." Unsure what was said on the other end, he suddenly seemed flustered, coaxing, don't cry, I'll definitely prove it to you." Holding his cell phone, Daniel walked over. His gaze lingered for a moment on Grace's wine-stained, disheveled appearance before he spoke calmly. "You just said you wouldn't hold a grudge. Chloe is young, and you've scared her. Give your engagement ring to prove you're not angry with her." Grace couldn't help but frown and ask, "The ring too? Why not just go all the way and have the 2 of you get a marriage license?" Daniel's eyes filled with anger. "Grace, you're a woman too, don't slander Chloe's reputation." This was the 997th time Daniel had turned on Grace for his best female friend. Grace didn't want to back down anymore. A giggle came from the phone. "Grace, don't be mad. Daniel and I are just messing around. Don't blame us. I just saw you throwing such a big fit today and wanted to cheer you up." Grace's face went cold. "I understand. You must have really enjoyed this method of making other couples fight over you with your ex." Chloe instantly burst into tears, and Daniel slapped. "Grace. Apologize. How did you become so cold-blooded?" Grace remained silent. Daniel suddenly laughed, then stepped past her and pulled a $500,000 savings account passbook from deep inside the cabinet. Grace's face paled, and she tried to snatch it back. This was the money she had saved for 10 years, intended to buy a house for them to live in as a married couple. Daniel, however, looked at Grace maliciously and gently coaxed Chloe. He suggested they go shopping to buy a designer handbag to compensate her for emotional distress. Grace was also forcibly dragged along behind the 2 of them. Upon meeting, Chloe couldn't help but leap into Daniel's arms. Daniel expertly caught her, securing her waist to prevent her from falling. "Pal, you're rich. Are you really going to buy me a handbag?" Her eyes sparkled as she asked in a carefree manner. Then she seemed a bit remorseful. "If you spend so much money buying me things, Grace won't get mad, will she?" "It's fine, buy her something. I'll just take a few freebies. We're all pals, I'm not bothered by that little unpleasantness earlier." Grace's wrist was still clutched by Daniel, and when Chloe suddenly jumped, their collision caused a sharp crack. Grace's forehead broke out in cold sweat from the pain. Her wine-soaked dress clung to her body, and the wind blowing in made her shiver with cold. Daniel seemed not to notice, continuing to coax Chloe. Girls shouldn't be so kind-hearted. You always think of others, but they might not appreciate it. You're generous and big-hearted, while others are calculating and petty. A pal like me certainly won't let you suffer. Today, buy whatever you want, whatever you like. She doesn't even deserve the freebies. Chloe couldn't help but laugh aloud, cheerfully patting Grace's shoulder. Grace, don't be mad. We're all pals, I get it. Daniel is always straightforward. If you apologize to him and explain properly, he definitely won't be angry. Chloe's gloating words reached Grace's ears, and a surge of anger rose within her. But at that moment, she couldn't focus on it. Her body trembled uncontrollably, and tears streamed from her eyes due to the pain in her wrist. Her disheveled appearance at the counter caught the attention of the sales assistant. Just as the assistant was about to call the police, Daniel calmly explained, "She's faking it. She deliberately splashed red wine on herself at my and Chloe's engagement celebration, trying to sabotage our engagement celebration. As a result, she got her karma. Her parents are even disowning her." To atone, she offered a few $1,000s to compensate Chloe, letting her pick a freebie. But her parents couldn't stand it and paid me $500,000 to compensate for the good fortune she stole from the engagement celebration. Chloe obediently nestled into Daniel's arms, feigning a tearful sob. Grace knew Chloe must have been secretly overjoyed. Chloe was petty and selfish. Once, when they went to the mall to buy skincare products, Chloe hated Grace simply because Grace had gotten to the last set of products just a moment before her. She deliberately put pineapple juice in Grace's skincare products, causing Grace to have an allergic reaction that took half a year to recover from. Yet, Chloe consistently feigned a carefree demeanor. When presented the security footage to confront her, Daniel defended Chloe. He said Chloe was just being playful and told Grace not to be so petty. After his explanation, the sales assistant's gaze turned to disgust. She took a broom, using the excuse of cleaning up dirt, and ushered Grace to the door. Grace endured the pointing and whispering gazes of the crowd, watching her fiancé patiently coaxing his best female friend who had disrupted their engagement celebration. Suddenly, she felt it wasn't worth it. After standing for a short while, Grace developed a high fever. She collapsed onto the ground, utterly weak. Amidst the gasps of the crowd, Daniel rushed towards Grace in a panic, but grabbed his hand. Chloe pointed at the security footage on her cell phone, crying sorrowfully. "Daniel, Bella hasn't woken up yet, I don't know what's wrong. She's already an hour later than usual." Some people in the crowd knew they had arrived together. Seeing lying on the ground, and Daniel and Chloe showing no concern, they muttered about the decline of moral values. Daniel's expression darkened, but he still paused, holding Chloe and gently coaxing her. "Don't be afraid, we're going home now to take Bella to the vet." Grace pleaded, trying to grab Daniel. "Call an ambulance for me," but kicked her away. "There are so many people here, someone will take you to the hospital." With that, he hugged the crying Chloe and rushed away. The sales assistant tried to speak on his behalf. "Perhaps his child at home is sick, the couple is probably anxious." A flicker of understanding passed through the crowd's eyes. Only knew that Bella was Chloe's dog. Daniel had abandoned Grace for a dog that had woken up an hour later than usual. Grace stared blankly at the sky, feeling her strength drain away bit by bit. Just as she was about to completely lose consciousness, she was lifted into a slightly cool embrace. It felt like her father's embrace when she was a child. Suddenly, she felt utterly meaningless. Even strangers cared for her, while her fiancé chose to care for a dog. Grace murmured, "Daniel, I don't want you anymore." When woke up again, she was alone. She understood. Daniel was still with Chloe. Her heart felt hollow. So many years of persistence seemed so ridiculous and pitiful at this moment. For Grace couldn't stop crying, as if releasing all the unrequited love, the bitterness, and the grievances accumulated over the years. No one bothered her. In that shared apartment, Daniel would frown even at the slightest hint of unhappiness from her. Though unspoken, his gestures and expressions always implied she was being dramatic. She cried her heart out, undisturbed, in a hospital room. The moment she finished crying, she felt a long-lost sense of freedom. She didn't want this toxic relationship anymore. As she was thinking, a message came through on her cell phone. A colleague congratulated her, saying she was about to be promoted. The client was very satisfied with the proposal Grace had worked on and specifically requested her to handle the handover. A warm feeling flowed through Grace. Her company specialized in wedding gown design. Influenced by her beauty-loving mother, she had loved designing clothes since childhood. She held an endless for wedding gowns, especially for such sacred occasions. Unfortunately, the wedding gowns she designed in the past had never garnered much attention. Grace was excited and couldn't wait another moment. She checked out of the hospital, planning to sort out matters at the company before returning to inquire about the kind person who helped her and to thank them properly. However, when she arrived at the company, she heard a series of arguments. Walking in, she saw various expressions on everyone's faces. Daniel declared righteously, "This opportunity should go to Chloe. Grace has no talent. She's been with the company for so long and hasn't produced a single piece of work." Grace was stunned for a moment. She clearly submitted a set of wedding gown designs every month. Daniel was spouting nonsense just to prevent her promotion. Just as Grace was about to refute him, Daniel dropped a bombshell. "I can testify that Grace's work is plagiarized from Chloe's. I live with Grace every day and have never seen her design anything, but I've seen Chloe draw this particular design." The entire room fell silent. Chloe also looked betrayed. "Grace, I trusted you so much. No wonder you insisted on buying me a designer handbag to compensate me that day. It turns out you." Daniel, appearing noble and righteous, proposed, "As a team leader, I suggest we dismiss such a dishonest employee. We cannot bend the rules just because we're a couple. The company's interests must come first." Grace trembled with rage. She stared directly at Daniel, feeling as if she was finally seeing his hypocritical true colors. Grace picked up a glass of water and splashed it on Daniel. 10 years of my youth wasted on you. It's truly disgusting, Daniel. We're over." Chloe gasped and carefully wiped Daniel's face with her arm. Daniel, enraged and humiliated, retorted, "Are you upset because I hit a nerve? Even if you threaten me with a breakup, it won't hide the fact that you stole someone else's idea." Her colleagues, with whom she usually got along well, stood rooted to the spot. Not one person came forward to say a word in her defense. Because of Daniel's slander and defamation, this was the third time in 2 days that Grace had been left isolated and disgraced by everyone. "Who dares to fire my fiancé?" Everyone froze, looking stunned at the newcomer. The boss, Julian, slowly appeared at the entrance. Julian was a notoriously eligible bachelor, young, handsome, and highly capable at work. This bridal design company was a trial venture his family had him run. At this moment, the man almost everyone in the company admired and envied gently helped Grace up. He smiled and said, "My little fiancé, why did you leave the hospital without waiting for me?" Only then did Grace realize that the kind person who had carried her to the hospital was her boss. She recalled her father once mentioning a fiancé with the same name as her boss. Grace couldn't help but blush with embarrassment. It was incredibly awkward to have been acting out her love-hate drama with a scoundrel in front of her fiancé's office every day. Daniel looked jealous and incredulous. "Boss, are you kidding? Don't be fooled by this woman. She's always flirting and plagiarizing others' work." Julian's expression remained unchanged as he imperiously introduced Grace to everyone. "Allow me to introduce you. This is my fiancée, and your future boss's wife." Chloe, whose face had been flushed with admiration upon seeing Julian, instantly turned pale, her gaze at Grace filled with unconcealed resentment. She shrieked angrily, "Grace, when did you start flirting with the boss? You have a boyfriend. Can't you have some self-respect?" Grace replied coldly, "I've already broken up with Daniel." "What, stealing one boyfriend isn't enough? Is your heart set on someone else?" Grace feigned a sweet expression, taking Julian's arm. "Let me introduce you all to my fiancé, Julian." Immediately, the formerly indifferent employees' expressions changed. One by one, they offered enthusiastic congratulations. They praised Grace and Julian as a match made in heaven, handsome and beautiful, and lauded Grace as intelligent, with a passion and talent for art. Daniel's face grew increasingly unsightly. He took Chloe's hand, about to leave, but Julian called out to him, "Daniel, you're fired." Daniel was both shocked and enraged. "Why? You're firing me without cause for this woman. I can sue you." Julian chuckled, pulling some documents from his office desk. "For years, you've been stealing Grace's work, changing the name, and using it multiple times. You should be well aware of how inflated your position as team leader is. Furthermore, you're not a part-time art student at all, you studied computer science. Your employee records are falsified. I can report you to the police and demand you repay all your illicit gains from these years." As the employee records were passed around, Grace saw the identical comparison images and realized that Daniel had been crying wolf. He had been stealing her work all along, yet he had belittled it as worthless. This time, she had overstepped her authority by submitting her work to a higher-up. He feared her promotion would expose the truth and also that she would become more capable than him, which was why he was so insistent on giving the opportunity to Chloe. Suddenly, Everyone looked at Daniel with contempt, and mocking remarks filled the air. Daniel's face flashed with anger, but he suppressed it. He looked at Grace. Grace, I'll give you one more chance. If you resign and come back to me, I'm still willing to marry you. Grace's love had long since turned to disgust. She ignored Daniel's words. She offered a gentle thank you to Julian. Daniel's expression hardened. Fine, don't regret it. He strode away. Grace didn't try to stop him. She contacted a lawyer and sued Daniel and Chloe in court for theft of property. The moment Chloe received the legal notice, she impatiently sought Grace out, arranging to meet at a coffee shop. Grace originally didn't want any more contact with them, but Chloe scoffed on the phone, "You'll definitely want to hear this secret. If you don't come, you deserve to be treated like a fool for all these years." The 10 years of Grace's wasted youth were all due to Daniel and Chloe's improper and ambiguous relationship. Grace still went, bringing Julian along. She instructed him, "Order food at the restaurant next door first. After I've finished talking with Chloe, we'll have lunch together." His eyes were full of smiles. He patted Grace's hand and dutifully went to the restaurant next door. Grace's face hardened as she walked into the coffee shop. Chloe was already restlessly looking around in her seat. The moment she saw Grace, her expression suddenly became prim. "I can tell you the secret, but only if you withdraw the legal notice and resign from the company, and break up with Julian. I promise I won't interfere with your and Daniel's lives anymore." Chloe's expression was composed, acting as if she had Grace completely under her control. Grace scoffed and turned to leave. All of Chloe's conditions hinged on Grace still caring about Daniel, but now he was a stranger to her. He was also a thief. Not reporting him to the police would be an act of mercy. Why should Grace give up her career and make why for Chloe because of him? "Chloe, are you really interested in Julian? Aren't you Daniel's best female friend? Didn't you just break up and appear at someone else's engagement celebration, impersonating a fiancé, just to get back at your ex? What's up? Found a better target, want to go after the boss to make your ex-boyfriend mad?" Chloe's face turned red and green, unable to maintain her usual carefree demeanor. She shrieked uncontrollably, "What do you know? I was never the other woman, you were the one who stole my boyfriend, Daniel, back then. He always loved me. That year he fought with Alex over a hair clip. He was only jealous because Alex was dating me at the time. He lied to you about searching all night for a craftsman to fix your hair clip. He actually just glued it together at dawn. You cherished it like a treasure, but that night he was on his knees begging me to get back together with him." Grace stood frozen. Chloe's words struck like lightning, dispelling the fog in her mind. No wonder she could never find a reason for Daniel's coldness towards her. She had pursued him bitterly for 10 years, and he still wouldn't agree to an engagement. It turned out that from the very beginning, he loved someone else. Everyone knew this fact, which was why those people at the engagement celebration looked at her with mockery, laughing at her stupidity, unable to see for 10 years that her boyfriend had never loved her, yet she meticulously designed and planned her wedding, believing in her deep affection. In the end, everyone saw her as a joke. Because had never loved Grace, he so casually swapped out his fiancée, splashed red wine on her wedding dress, and even suggested she could simply rehost the celebration. In his eyes, Grace had thrown herself at him for 10 years, and his agreeing to an engagement with her was the greatest honor he could bestow. Tears welled in Grace's eyes. She looked at Chloe. Chloe's face was triumphant and unapologetic. Grace spoke coldly, "Go back and tell Daniel that I will not withdraw the legal notice. I will fight both of you to the end." Chloe's expression finally changed, tinged with anger. "You're breaking your promise?" Grace smiled bitterly. People only truly felt pain when it happened to them. Grace wiped away her tears, no longer looking at Chloe, and turned to find Julian. That afternoon, Grace and Julian discussed their future plans. He was very supportive. Upon returning, Grace resigned from her job. The court's efficiency was swift. Due to ample evidence, Daniel and Chloe were directly ordered to repay $500,000 and an additional $100,000 for emotional distress. Daniel also received a mark on his employee records, meaning no relevant jobs would hire him in the future. Chloe also realized then that in everyone's eyes, she had long been linked with Daniel, and no one would want to date her. Those friends who were in relationships deeply detested Chloe, strictly prohibiting her from getting close to them, fearing their own partners might also be infected with such warped morals. After resigning, Grace used the $600,000 compensation from Daniel to found a bridal design company, personally designing wedding gown designs and serving every beautiful bride. Julian brought in many clients. He partnered with her, helping her grow her company. Grace gladly accepted, not clinging on with endless thanks, but making the company better and better. Working together for mutual benefit was the best way to thank Julian. After overcoming her emotional turmoil, Grace's career soared, quickly achieving significant success and considerable local recognition. She became known as a wealthy businesswoman, and with her increased visibility, her past relationship. A curious bride once asked Grace, "Aren't you sad about your previous relationship being such a drama?" Grace smiled and replied, "In that relationship, I loved seriously and have no regrets. The previous relationship failed because the other person wasn't good. I don't need to betray those who love me for someone who didn't." 8 After's answer, she forgot about the incident. She never expected Daniel to appear with Chloe at her and Julian's engagement celebration. Security couldn't stop them, and they burst in. Daniel was wearing a suit, and Chloe's wedding dress was splashed with red wine. Daniel's expression was wild and yet deeply affectionate. "Wife, we're already engaged. Give me another chance. We'll hold our wedding again. Chloe is the real other woman. Look, I didn't let her wear the same dress as you." Grace didn't say anything harsh to provoke him. Perhaps due to career setbacks or something else, his mental state seemed problematic. She called several security guards to take the two out. The engagement celebration continued without any more incidents and concluded smoothly. Grace and Julian exchanged a smile and embraced. Beneath them, sounds of benevolent congratulations rose. After the engagement, Grace continued to focus on her career, doing the work she loved, designing wedding gowns. She was incredibly busy but felt full and enriched. Julian was always very supportive. Time passed quickly, and 6 months later, Grace accepted Julian's proposal. They got their marriage license directly, deciding to hold the wedding 3 months later. While distributing wedding favors to former colleagues and friends, Grace heard about Daniel's activities after disrupting the engagement celebration. Daniel was sentenced to 5 years. "I heard Daniel sold all of Chloe's designer handbags and bought a house for them to live in as a married couple, despite her objections. They used to be so close, but it came to this." Chloe resented Daniel for stealing her things and splashing her with red wine. That day, as soon as they left the engagement celebration, Daniel was taken away by the police. Chloe had called the police in advance, accusing Daniel of robbery. Because had a prior record, he was immediately sentenced to 5 years. After that, Chloe moved to a new city to live. Grace sighed inwardly but then forgot about it. This outcome was the bitter consequences Daniel himself had sown. He deceived people's emotions and flirted with Chloe under the guise of friendship. At that moment, the bitter consequences were already waiting for him. Grace stood up. Julian stood in the sunlight, extending his hand, smiling gently. Grace smiled and grasped his warm, sincere hand. Chloe's perspective couldn't accept it. Grace was a joke, treasuring the man Chloe didn't want. Chloe just waved her hand, and Daniel would listen to her every command. When said she wanted to have an engagement celebration with him, he looked startled, then his face filled with joy. Grace stood helplessly at the engagement celebration, like a joke. Ha ha ha, how entertaining. She deserved to be so humble, to be trampled under Chloe's heel. Only when Chloe deigned to give her a little attention from Daniel could she have it. To be honest, Chloe was also quite surprised. Daniel was, after all, Grace's fiancé, yet simply because Grace expressed a bit of displeasure, Daniel slapped her and withdrew the money for her house for them to live in as a married couple, all to buy Chloe a designer handbag and appease her. This must be the difference between a man in love and one who isn't. But what did it matter? Daniel insisted on giving it to Chloe. Chloe never expected Grace to cling to the boss, Julian. Chloe had set her sights on Julian the first day she joined the company. He was rich and handsome, she had long considered him her future husband. Why should Grace be able to rise high and become rich and powerful? What infuriated Chloe was that after that, everything went wrong. Grace sued Chloe and Daniel. Chloe thought it would be over after paying the money, but everyone believed Chloe and Daniel were a couple. How could Chloe possibly be interested in him? He didn't even have money to buy a house for them to live in as a married couple. Chloe wasn't as foolish as Grace, who painstakingly saved money for years to help buy a house for them to live in as a married couple, only for it all to be spent by another girl. Daniel must have had something wrong with him. When they weren't together, he was so infatuated with Chloe, and he treated Grace so terribly. Then, when he heard Grace was getting engaged, he started acting all affectionate again. He stole all of Chloe's designer handbags and sold them, intending to buy a house for them to live in as a married couple. Fortunately, Chloe had foresight and called the police in advance. That day, when he went crazy, made her wear a wedding dress, splashed red wine on her, and took her to find Grace. The other party probably realized Daniel was unstable and didn't dare provoke him. They called several bodyguards and had them escorted out. Daniel was sentenced to 5 years. Chloe immediately moved to a new city and started a new life. From then on, Chloe's life seemed to fall into a strange loop. Every boyfriend she dated either had the one that got away, or a best female friend just like Chloe once was. The most absurd one was about to get engaged, and on the day of the engagement, the boyfriend fell in love at first sight with a county clerk's office staff member. Chloe never found a sincere, reliable partner until she was old. Before she died, she thought, this must be her karma for interfering in other people's relationships. Julian's perspective had known for a long time that Grace was the fiancée his family had arranged for him. Initially, he found it amusing. He knew she had a boyfriend, she was so naive it was laughable. Her boyfriend and Chloe were flirting and cozying up every day, but Grace acted as if she hadn't noticed, diligently designing wedding gowns by herself. One time, he worked late and accidentally discovered that Grace hadn't left either. Her boyfriend had gone off drinking with Chloe, arm in arm, the moment he clocked out. Julian found it a bit unbearable and wanted to give Grace a hint. Walking behind her, he suddenly saw her designs. They immediately captivated him. The wedding gown was white, with several different colored elements added to the skirt. It wasn't ornate, instead, it seemed to return to simplicity, exuding a cozy feeling of everyday life. Julian was surprised and couldn't help but take a couple of steps closer. Grace then noticed him, startled. He thought she was like a flustered kitten, adorable and cute. He suppressed that slight stir of emotion and stepped forward to pick up the designs. As he looked at them, he felt Grace was too foolish, talented yet completely unaware. He had seen many of these designs among those submitted by Daniel, who had won countless bonuses and praises for them. Grace knew nothing, worked for so many years, and hadn't even been promoted to a full employee. At that moment, Julian realized he felt a surge of anger because of this girl. He felt she was being taken advantage of and was indignant. The more Julian observed afterward, the more he realized that Grace was a pure girl, serious about everything. Serious about work, serious about her relationship. He heard she was diligently saving money to help Daniel buy a house for them to live in as a married couple. But her judgment was terrible. How could she choose such a partner? Did he deserve her? Julian secretly collected evidence of Daniel's theft of other people's work. He had always known that Grace was unwilling to get engaged to him. Her family was wealthy, yet she was willing to be with Daniel and endure hardship with him. Normally he wouldn't have cared, but now he felt a little uneasy. What was he inferior to Daniel in? So, when he heard his father say that Grace was willing to get engaged to him, he was overjoyed. He didn't think about anything else, just wanted to go to Grace's apartment to find her. On the way, he passed a shop and saw many people gathered, faintly hearing someone had collapsed with a fever, and mentions of indifference. Walking closer, he immediately saw Grace lying on the ground, her face flushed with fever, her wrist unnaturally bent, and red wine dried on her wedding dress. She was almost unconscious. Julian's mind went blank. He didn't care about anything else, scooped Grace up, and rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, he learned her wrist was fractured. He felt a mix of sorrow and pain, carefully watching her for a while. Even asleep, she still frowned, seemingly in distress. He estimated the time and went out to buy some porridge for her to drink when she woke up. However, he encountered a business partner and was delayed for a while. When he returned to the hospital room, Grace had already left. He could only return to the company, where he heard Daniel falsely accusing his fiancée of plagiarism and demanding her dismissal. Fortunately, he arrived in time. He immediately intervened. Who dares to fire my fiancée? Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it with your friends. We look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments section. Feel free to share your views, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting stories. See you next time.